Good morning. Did everyone enjoy the talks yesterday? And did everyone have a good time at the unicorn party last night? Awesome. Yeah, by the way, I did too, and thanks to the IT Rev team and the CloudBees team for making that possible. That was great. And trust me, the talks that we have in store for you today are just as amazing. So in the next 11 minutes, what I'd like to do is maybe share with you one level deeper in terms of like why we construct the DevOps Enterprise Summit talks in the way we do. So yesterday, I talked about what the goals were. What I'd like to do is actually share with you why experience reports. And really, I think as adult learners, as leaders, we don't really learn from people telling us what they think we should do, or people telling us what they think they might do, right? Really we want to hear how other people solve problems. And so it's less didactic lectures in a classroom and more through experiential learning. And so I think what's been a more effective way that people learn is actually seeing how other people solve problems. So here's a problem I was trying to solve, here's what I did, here's what I thought would happen, here's what actually happened, and here's the problems that still remain. And that really is the basis of the experience report. So one of the reasons that I've asked every experience report to match a certain structure is really to help frame everything in a very specific way. So first, tell us about the industry that you compete in. Tell us about your organization. Where do you fit in how the organization fits? Tell us about how the business problem that you set out to solve. Where did you start and why? What did you do? Tell us about the tools and techniques that you used. What were the observable outcomes? And here's the challenges that still remain. And often for the people who submit their presentation, and I often ask for a testimonial, right? What is the external, verifiable evidence that someone actually appreciated what you do, right? And because it really shows, and that's something that we can actually show to other people because we can actually inherit that validation. And what I find really awesome about that is that's actually very similar to the scientific method, where you state a hypothesis, you perform the experiment, you either confirm or disprove the hypothesis, and then you repeat. So it matches the scientific method and it matches a continual learning process. So I just wanted to share that because it specifically describes why why these experience reports have this form. The other thing I want to share with you is a concept that actually came from around here, and maybe to motivate that, let me tell you about the first DevOps Enterprise Summit. So we had our first DevOps Enterprise Summit in 2014 in San Francisco, and the thesis was that we wanted to have a conference not for the unicorns. So the unicorns are the Facebooks, Amazon, and Googles. We want to have a conference for the horses, right? Large, complex organizations that have been around for decades. And this is before our first conference in London, where you have organizations that go back not only decades, but even centuries, right? When the UK HMRC presented, I was stunned to find out that they were founded in the year 1200. Barclays was founded, in the year 1634, that predates cash, right? Which I don't think they have any code that goes that far back, but they certainly have legacies and traditions and values that go back centuries. But even in the US, we had organizations that went back almost 100 years. And our specific goal was, this was a conference for horses, by horses, no unicorns allowed. Even though we had so many friends at the unicorns, we didn't want to put them front and center. And I think our observations for this was that there was a certain universality to the problems that were being faced in large, complex organizations. That there was a feeling of something genuinely exciting and momentous happening. That that there was a common mission and purpose that we were all on. And the third thing that really struck me, not then, but some months later, was that this is not only a community, but a community that actually loves helping each other. And so here's how I learned that. So this is Heather Mickman. She was Senior Director of Engineering at Target, and her compatriot, peer Ross Clanton, on the operations side. And they were talking about how they started, why, and how they started the DevOps movement at Target, which is one of the largest retailers in the United States. And they gave a phenomenal presentation that I thought was seminal. Months later, they reached out to me and said, would I be willing to fly to headquarters in Minneapolis, Minnesota, because they wanted to put on another internal conference for their executives to help recreate the DevOps enterprise experience. And so I certainly said yes, right? I thought that was really great. But what I really didn't understand until after I got off the airplane and met the team at Target was that it wasn't just me. They'd also invited Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jason Cox from Disney, Johnny Woodridge from Marks and Spencer, and all the and Courtney Kistler from back then she was the head of technology at Nordstrom. And so they literally were recreating the DevOps enterprise experience for the senior executives, and it was something that dazzled me. That they had been communicating with each other, and we're all converging to help the DevOps enterprise journey at Target. And one of the things that I found so memorable about that was that one of the senior leaders at Target said, "This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Heather and Ross, for doing this." He said, "I can share with some certainty that never before in the history of Target has an executive from a competitor come to speak to us and share their lessons learned." And they so much appreciated that. And so I think that's really been a mark of the type of interactions that you see within the DevOps enterprise community. For example, the talk from Ralph Waltram and Christoph Brink referencing the work at Adidas and referencing the work that John Smart did at Barclays. It amazes me to see how quickly those practices disseminate within organizations. And by the way, Russ Clanton will be presenting tomorrow at 10:25 here in the Aurora Ballroom. He's been at Verizon for 3 years, and he'll be talking about some of the lessons learned doing DevOps transformations in large, complex organizations in the Fortune 50 companies. So you're very privileged. We're all very privileged that Ross is here giving the talk tomorrow. So that was an incredible day. And just seeing kind of the amount of sharing, and that's just one of many, many ways I've seen this community share with each other, which reminds me of a gentleman named Brian Eno. So actually, I have some notes on it. Right, so Brian Eno is a musician, record producer, visual artist. He's known for helping define and reinvent the sound of some of the most popular bands in the 1980s and 90s, including U2, Devo, Talking Heads, David Bowie, and more. And so, yes, he's done all that, but he also is credited for coining this term called scenius. And he writes that despite heroic mythology, lone geniuses do not drive most scientific, cultural, business, or policy advances. Instead, they come from a scene, an exceptionally productive community of practice that develops novel epistemic norms. Major innovation may indeed take a genius, but the genius is created in part by a scenius. It stands for the intelligence and intuition of a whole cultural scene. It is a communal form of genius. And I love this last phrase. Individuals immersed in a scenius will blossom and produce their best work. When buoyed by a scenius, you act like a genius. More importantly, your like-minded peers and the entire environment inspires you. And there are 3 characteristics of scenius. 1, mutual appreciation. Risky moves are applauded by the group. Subtlety appreciated, friendly competition goes, and it creates the best of peer pressure. 2nd, rapid exchange of tools and techniques. As soon as something is invented, it is flaunted and shared. Ideas flow quickly because they are flowing inside of a common language and sensibility. And 3, network effects of success. When a record is broken, a hit happens, a breakthrough erupts, and the success is claimed by the entire scene. And this empowers the entire scene to further successes. When I saw this, I mean, I still have chills reading it now. That I think a hallmark of the DevOps enterprise community is that not only is there a rapid exchange of tools and techniques, but whenever a success happens, someone gets more responsibility, that is used as evidence. It's celebrated and then used to advance their own missions within an organization. So I thought this was very appropriate. And so this is in the, Brian Eno comes from the artistic community, but this reminds me of another concept. And this comes from the physics space. I remember reading this book about 20 years ago. Dr. Thomas Kuhn wrote a famous book called The Structure of Scientific Revolution. And so the terms paradigm shift, inflection point, those are popularized by Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel. But that was actually drawn from this very famous book. In fact, when people talk about the Kuhnsian moment, right, that's really referring to the point when that paradigm shift happens. But one of the really interesting things about this book was that he made this observation that whenever there is a major kind of worldview change, it turns out that we can all point to the event, right, as we went from Copernican to Newtonian to Einsteinian, and it looks like a single person did it, right? But it turns out in each one of those periods, there was actually a group of researchers, sometimes in cooperation, sometimes in competition, but they were all sort of trying to prove the same thing. And then it's like a sublimation event happens when gases turn into a solid, right? That instantly, right, the revolution happens. And so in the case of geocentrism in the days of Ptolemy, right, everyone thought the universe rotated around the Earth, right? And then as you add, planets and then moons ordering planets, you have to go through more and more contortions to try to explain the observable phenomena that you see, right? So it's really gets increasingly difficult to explain why the thing in red, does this really weird loop, right, to match the patterns that you actually see in the sky. And then Copernicus comes along and says, oh, there's actually a better model that explains observable phenomena and confirms this deeply held intuition that there has to be a simpler way, right? And I think that's really what's happening in our space. We know that the orthodoxies of project management and ITIL just aren't working. There's a better way to work. And I suspect that, certainly within our lifetime, hopefully within this decade, right, that this better, faster, safer way of working, just overnight becomes so, right, because it happens in physics. Oh, and by the way, I also have to acknowledge that one of the other things in terms of rapid dissemination tools and techniques is John Smart's definition of DevOps, which I just loved, and that was actually presented here at DevOps Enterprise. So the last thing I'll mention is that we have these things called these forum papers. So not only do we publish books, but there are these things that come out with these guidance papers where we assemble people from the DevOps Enterprise community. We get together for a couple of days and we actually write guidance papers. And so in my mind, it's sort of like it's not a journal, but it's just a way to say, all right, here's the biggest obstacles that face the community. Let's get together and write down what we think the ways to overcome those obstacles are and create guidance for that. And I'm just delighted that so many of these are being read, and a lot of them are so promising that they've actually turned into books, right? So McKirsten's Project to Product that book actually came from a set of working papers that was done in conjunction with Ross Clanton and many others who are trying to implement these transformations at large, complex organizations. So my purpose for sharing that is really to maybe describe the motivations for why we do certain things and maybe give you another frame for why we do certain things here at the conference. So with that, that concludes my remarks. So why don't we bring out Jeff Gallimore to talk about how we're going to run the rest of the day. Jeff Gallimore.
Did everybody have a good time at the party last night? Oh, come on. It was much more fun than that, at least from my view. I made a couple of passes through the expo hall, and I was very pleased to see lots of croissants and no donuts. It was great. Hopefully you got your signed excerpt of the Unicorn Project, and you also got your pair of magical unicorn socks. Now, we also have some good news. We found the socks yesterday. I'm going to let this picture just sink in for a second. We've bought back all of the socks. No, actually, it's a joke. We actually found them in the shipper's warehouse, and they are actually on site today. If you want a pair of socks and didn't have a chance to get them last night at the party, they are at the IT Revolution pop-up book stand right outside these doors. Got a few public service announcements. Sharing is caring, feedback is a gift. Get the speaker evaluations in through the app. You can also download the slides from yesterday on these two links in Dropbox and GitHub. We will continue to post those at the end of each day, today and tomorrow. A couple of scheduling changes that we have. The workplace engagement panel with Dr. Stephen Spear, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, and Dr. Christina Maslach has moved from the Aurora 6 and 7 around the corner into this room today at 2:10, and the talks that were here, Stephen Thorne and Rosalind Radcliffe, have moved into Aurora 6 and 7. Again, that's around the corner to the right. We've got networking time again today. A lot of you participated in the Birds of a Feather, the Speaker's Corner, and the Lean Coffee sessions. We have that happening again from 3:30 to 4:30 today. Speaker's Corner again is out these doors and to the right next door here. We've got Lean Coffee happening in Riverview upstairs. It was a packed house yesterday. Who participated in the Lean Coffee yesterday? Yeah. How many of you participated for the first time in Lean Coffee yesterday? Awesome. You had a great time, right? You learned a lot? Yes. Okay. So for those of you that didn't get the chance to participate yesterday, it was almost full, so you want to make sure that you don't miss that opportunity today. Birds of a feather, again, out the doors and to the left over in the foyer. And then after closing today, we have a really neat programming. It's called Lightning Talks. For those of you that aren't familiar with Lightning Talks, it's a 5-minute presentation from the speaker, 20 slides, auto-advancing every 15 seconds. It is a hard talk to do.
Really
a hard talk to do, because you don't control the slides. So show up. There's a lot of great speakers, a lot of great content that will be happening. Stick around.
And they're so fun.
It is really fun. It is really fun. You will learn a lot. You will laugh. You will cry. It will be better than cats, I promise. And then we also have book signings happening after the Lightning Talks. There'll be 5 books being signed, including Accelerate, that very first one. I'll point your attention to that little red circle that's on the cover of the Accelerate book. That is for the Shingo Publication Award. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with what the Shingo Institute is, they make awards to people and give prizes to people who have achieved operational excellence. This one is basically the Nobel Prize for Lean, okay? So, Nicole, wherever you are, you're awesome, and now we all know it. All right. Yes. Thanks to our founding partner, IT Rev, our platinum sponsors, gold sponsors, silver sponsors, other sponsors, including the Lightning Talks from Nutanix tonight. The Expo Hall hours open at 10 o'clock until 5 today. And get ready for an awesome day 2.
Thanks, Jeff.